Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ham Radio DX. I'm Hayden, VK7HH, and welcome wherever you are. Good morning if you're in a Monday time zone, or good evening if you're in a Sunday time zone, I suppose. We've got a very good panel lined up today. Originally, I said that I only had two on the panel, but we've got extra today to answer your questions on antennas here on Ask An Elmer. So hopefully we get some good questions. So throw them in the chat and we'll see how we go. But let's go straight to our panel and we'll introduce them one at a time. We've got Steve KM9G, temporary offline.
Hey, Hayden, how's it going?
Good. What's been happening?
We have been doing a weekly FT8 off, a competition one-on-one between me and Sean. And Sean is Ham Radio Dude. And everybody who else wants to play along. And we've been getting our butts whooped for the past couple of weeks by Mike, N8YO, with his 500 watts of power. It's been an awesome show. So
that's what happens when you throw out the challenge. Someone's going to come in and it's just going to beat you.
Yeah. So it's been a fun show.
Yeah, that's good. We've also got Adam K6ARK. How are you, Adam?
Hey, how's it going? I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Not too bad, not too bad. What's been happening in your world? Have you had much on your channel? You been out and about soldering? What's happening?
Yeah, a bit. I was out last weekend having some fun in the ARRL VHF contest, working as a 3-band station from a SOTA Summit, 6 meters, 2 meters, and 70 centimeters. And I've got a video tomorrow for Monday Night Ham Radio coming out on that one, summing up that adventure. Beyond that, a couple of projects in the shop here. The workbench is a mess, but I successfully completed modifying this QRP VER. It's, I think, a Ukrainian guy that builds these with an internal battery now, a power switch on the front here, and a USB-C charging port. And just made the first contact on that today to Jason K6ARK. So pretty cool.
Sweet. Actually, Jason from Ham Radio TV, he's got a very similar call sign to you. I didn't realize it's so close.
Yeah.
I think he was calling it the California Brothers, wasn't it? So
yes.
Great. We've also got Steve Goodgame, K5ATA. How are you?
Good, man. How are you? Good to be here.
What's been happening in your world? You've recently moved, haven't you?
No. I've added a job to my job zone. I'm still teaching the Padawans all day, but now my technical title is instructional designer at ARRL for some of their learning center content. So I'm staying busy trying to keep up with all 17 hats at the same time.
And what's been happening on your channel? You got a video coming out for Monday Night Ham Radio?
No, I'm on Thursday this week. I've got a little video reviewing the Icom Bluetooth headset with the 705. So Monday was full when I finished, so I bumped it to Thursday.
And we've got Ape in the house on the comments. He says, "Isn't Ham Radio 2.0 a no-show?" And then he says, "Keep him in the green room." Well, no, we're not going to keep him in the green room. Let's pop him in. How are you, Jason?
I gotta tease Abe. He's hilarious. I told him I got drunk on Miller Lite after drinking 142 of them. They finally put me over the edge. So. What's up, Hayden? How are you?
Good. How are you? You've been doing a lot of live streams lately and some very interesting videos. I watched the other one with Callum last week. I think that was your lunchtime live stream.
Yes.
That was very good.
Mm-hmm.
So what else is happening on that Ham Radio 2.0 channel?
Well, we have a live stream tonight in about an hour and a half, about 90 minutes from now, at 7 p.m. Central Time, which is 1 a.m. UTC tomorrow morning. Going to be talking about some emergency radio comms and why the title of the episode will be Why Radio. So you can kind of take what you want to from that, and we're going to be talking about why you should have a radio in your hand right now. So kind of a hot topic in today's world right now, at least over here in the United States of America. And I don't know. I'm going to give you my take on it and see how many people disagree with me. But it's all good, man. Thanks for doing this tonight. I want to hit you up offline soon, Hayden, because I kind of had an idea for a different spin on this type of thing, and I want to get your opinion on it. But this Ask An Elmer thing is a really cool concept. So thanks for inviting me to it tonight.
No, it was good to have you and everyone else as well in the chat. We've got a few who are joining us. Ham Radio Dude says, hey, good to see you in there. Who else have we got in the chat? We're also streaming on Facebook as well. So we've got some Facebook comments. We've got Alan VK4NA. I know Alan. We've also, who else we've got? We've got Philip. It's good to see you, Philip. He's saying hi, Adam, in the chat. We've got Adrian VK2 VHF. And I noticed that we've also got a lot of temporary offline questions saying, what's your favorite call sign? That's there's plenty of questions in here. What's this one? What's the difference between a duck?
One leg is both the same. I figured I'd get it all started off with the word question in front to make it easier for you to see there, Hayden.
It'd make it a lot easier. I'm actually looking
Phil's
for
got
question
it.
Marks.
Phil's got one. Phil Durall. IC-705 duplexer HF antenna and VHF UHF antenna using it backwards to a normal implementation. I don't know. That seems more like a statement. What's your question, Phil?
Yeah. I think that's trying to... Well, the 705's only got one antenna connector on it, doesn't it? So you'll have to manually change between antennas. So perhaps...
Not if you use a DX Commander.
Yeah.
DX Commander is resonant on 2 meters and 70 centimeters.
A real all-band vertical, isn't it?
It is.
But as as Steve said, if you can pop a question in the chat and just start it off with a question, it would make it a lot easier to see.
So answering Phil's question, I think that is possible. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be. I mean, it's like you're making a fan dipole. You're making a fan antenna setup.
Yeah. No, that's exactly, a duplexer is just a couple of filters, a high pass filter and a low pass filter. And you can send power through it either way and it works just the same. So just make sure.
I wonder if he's talking about the real repeater style duplexer like you are, or if he just means like a Y plug.
It's a difference between a duplexer and a diplexer.
I always get that one as well, Jason.
The Y plug is a diplexer. The duplexer is what goes on the back of a repeater.
I've got a diplexer in my vehicle, which is the Yaesu FT-8900, and it allows me to run three separate antennas off that one radio because it only has one antenna connector.
Right.
So I think that's what Phil was referring to there. We also have. If we're moving on from that question, I just wanted to do a shout out. We've also got Rhea as well watching, so chat. Good to see you on here. We've also got Mike. Says sup, boys.
Mike.
741.
Rob.
And who else have we got here? We've got Kyle. Hello from Middle America. But we do have a question, and it was from Ape. This is actually a good one. What are the pros and cons of vertical antennas over horizontal? The first thing I think when I see that is noise.
Noise on the lower band, sure.
It's a factor.
It's vertical takeoff angle.
Takeoff angle, yep.
Takeoff angle is the first thing that comes to mind in my head. So
yeah,
the noise on a vertical for like 30 meters and below, and 30 meters and above, I should say. So like 10, 15, 20, 17 meters is not bad. But once you get to like 40 meters and 60 and 80, 160 meters, the noise is really bad. That's been my experience. Adam probably knows more than I do, so let him go.
I don't know about that, but I do have a few thoughts on it. Number one, a horizontally polarized antenna or horizontal antenna is going to have some degree of directionality broadside to the antenna. A vertical antenna is going to be more omnidirectional and isn't going to have those lobes or directions where it'll have a bit more gain than other directions. The other thing is that with a horizontal antenna, you're going to send more power up in the straight up direction or near vertical direction than you will with a vertical antenna. So if you want to make shorter distance contacts or have the option for shorter distance contacts, a horizontal antenna is going to serve you much better than a vertical antenna. Now, Another thing to note that Jason mentioned is takeoff angle. If you've got a good vertical antenna with a good ground plane, you know, plenty of radials spread out underneath it, you end up with a pretty good low angle radiation that works well for longer distance contacts. You can get that out of a horizontal antenna if you get it high enough, but you've got to get it, you know, 3/4 of a wavelength, half a wavelength above ground level. On the higher bands, that's not that hard. On the lower bands, it gets really hard, you know, to get that that 40-meter dipole up 70+ feet. So those are some pros and cons and things to consider with the two.
I think the other thing as well with a horizontal antenna over a vertical is space. You can fit a vertical in a very small amount of space compared to, say, a horizontal antenna as well, depending on what configuration you have it in. And many would have watched the DX Commander video that I put out. That takes now a very small amount of space in my backyard. I don't need, and it gets me on 80 meters, and I don't need such a large amount of space. So that's another pro, I suppose, of a vertical antenna.
So I will agree and or argue that vertical antenna is easier to deploy than a horizontal antenna.
That's kind of a toss-up in my opinion. You know, a 9-to-1 random wire is pretty darn easy to deploy. But at the same time, I would say, you know, somebody said that in the chat. I forget who it was. Somebody, I think it was Rob. Verticals are easier to put out when space is limited. You know what? Anything is good as long as you put an antenna in the air. Put an antenna in the air, whatever you have space for, and get on the air and make some contacts. So, and then once you do that, you're gonna figure out that, oh, I wonder if I could do it this way. I wonder if I could do this kind of configuration. Nothing wrong with that. Experimentation is what ham radio is about. So put a vertical up, put a horizontal up, put a in-fed half wave or a random wire up, and get on the air, make some contacts, and do some trial and error runs and see what works best for your area.
As T.O. would say, the best antenna is the one that's in the air at the moment.
That's right.
Yep.
That's correct. He's right.
So T.O., I would argue that it's easier to set up an 80-meter horizontal antenna than an 80-meter vertical antenna.
I told you it was an agree argue. I wanted to start the religious war.
Let's change that to 2 meters. And which one do you think?
Yep.
Yeah. We've also got, this one should be a fairly straightforward one. Stephen says, what is a loading coil? I suppose when I think of that, it's pretty much making a antenna shorter. Just loading it.
I could explain that, but I think Adam probably could do it better.
Adam's the antenna guru
That's
of the
going to be
evening.
that's going to be.
Yeah,
We're going to talk about antennas. You might as well just put Adam up on the screen and let it go, Aiden.
Ask the mechanical engineer to make a fool of himself. No, so a loading coil is just an inductor placed in series with the antenna somewhere. Generally speaking, they are a bit more efficient if you don't place them at the base of a quarter wave, you know, or well, will be electrically equivalent to a quarter wave antenna. But placing the loading coil at the base is easier to build. At any rate, it's a big inductor, and you try to make that inductor as efficient and low loss as possible. When you put that loading coil in there, you end up with a less efficient overall radiator of an antenna because you simply have less size and less efficient radiation coming off of that antenna. So you also tend to sacrifice bandwidth as well, so your usable bandwidth is going to shrink. But it's just a big inductor placed in series with the antenna.
Here's a layman's way to describe it. And Adam, you're perfectly okay to tell me I'm wrong, but here's what, seriously, I'm not making a joke because I joke around all the time. So an antenna for a certain band, like 80 meters, 40 meters, 20 meters, whatever, has to be a certain length. So you take that length of antenna, let's say it's 132, 133 feet for 40 meters. Okay. You take that length of antenna and you have to have 133 feet worth of wire for that antenna. Well, if your backyard's only 50 or 75 feet across, you don't have 133 feet. So you take part of the antenna and you wrap it around a coil to shorten the antenna. There's still that much wire in the antenna. It's still 133 feet, but part of it is wrapped around a coil instead of spread out from end to end, so that the physical length of the wire is the same, but the actual length of the wire is shorter because part of it's wrapped around the coil. And then you get the proper SWR and impedance on the antenna for whatever band you're trying to work.
It ends up being close to that. You actually do end up needing technically more wire when you put a loading coil in.
It's not an exact science, but yes, you're right.
But that's kind of maybe a way to sort of envision it. That extra wire in that coil does this, it kind of functions in a similar way as having that wire stretched out would. It adds inductance and it's got some capacitance to it as well, but not as much as the wire stretched out in full length. So,
yes, okay, good, thank you.
I just want to do a couple of I want to do a couple of super chat shout outs. Ham Radio Dude, thank you very much, man, for the $10. Really appreciate that. And also to K Ensman for the $25 super chat. Thank you guys for supporting the show. Really appreciate you tuning in and for those super chats. The next question is one that is a real mystery for all of us. What is Apes Callsign?
I saw that. I'm glad you picked up on that. I saw that earlier.
There actually may be a hint or two on some of our Two Dudes Talking Ham radio streams that you might be able to get some hints. But you're going to have to dig deep.
Yeah,
I have no idea what area or what call sign he would be assigned, but I hope it's got APE at the end of it. I hope it's a vanity call with
A5
APE. Yeah, that would be so great.
A5PE, yeah.
Mm.
Who else we've got? We've got...
so look for Clark's question. Clark had a question about a Variac.
Oh, yes, I did see that.
Right above Ken, K. Ensman.
Yeah. The way that StreamYard shows the questions sometimes is not very intuitive. So
what Clark's question was, while Hayden's looking for it, is can his power supply be used as a Variac? And Clark's power supply can move all the way down to 7 volts. My question back to Clark would be, and we can continue to talk about it while we wait for his answer, but my question back to Clark would be, is it a dial up or is it like a Kerchunk 7, Kerchunk 9, Kerchunk 12, where you're making a much more stepped change? At which point, if it was, I would say, and I have no knowledge on this whatsoever, but I would suggest that you don't want to do that while you've got something plugged in, where a Variac has a very smooth dial that's designed to be turned on purpose to increase the power. And Rob 741 is saying Variacs are AC only, and that's what I thought as well.
Yeah, but you can connect a DC radio to the Variac and turn the power up on it so that if it's an older tube radio, you can not blow up the tubes by putting full power to it, upon startup. That's my understanding. I actually got a Variac in the garage. I've never used it. I got it for a friend of mine. I found it at Orlando Hemcation like 2 years ago. And a friend of mine who's a radar engineer, he's like, hey, if you ever find a Variac, pick it up for me. And I'm like, okay. So I picked it up for him and I haven't seen him since then. But it's good for testing old tube equipment that hadn't been powered up in a long time, from what I understand.
Yeah, thanks, Clark. Good question. We'll pop some more comments in the chat, and we'll come back to that. I'm sure we do have Raider K0. Is that K0? Yeah, 4 IQT. What is the advantage of a long wire antenna, and can it be too long? Must have a lot of space. Can it be too long? I know that there's a station here in Australia who runs a long wire he's got quite a large property, and his long wire, he uses it for all sorts of bands. So I'm not really familiar with long wires. I've never had the space. I've never experimented with them. What about you guys?
We have a guy that has joined our field day. Well, he's a member of our club, and he's come out to field day 2 or 3, 4 years in a row, and he's got a 20 meter 1.5 wave antenna, which I would call that a long wire, because that's what it is. It's just a wire. And I don't know what kind of matching unit or anything like that, or balancer he has on the bottom of it. I'm not sure of the design, but he has a 20 meter 1.5 wave. So it's basically 60 meters long. roughly. Or no, I'm sorry.
45.
45
No.
meters long. Yeah, I can't
40
math
meters.
today.
Don't math on camera, folks.
Yeah. So, so like 40 meters long or no, 30 meters long.
30 meters.
30 meters long. Yeah. So, but it's basically 1.5 times the wavelength, because generally you want to use a half wavelength. So if you're on the 20 meter band, you want to use a 10 meter antenna, 10 meter long antenna. If you want a 40 meter band, you want to use a 20 meter long antenna. Usually, this one was like 1.5 times the wavelength, so it's 30 meters long. And he used it all field day weekend. He did it like 2 years in a row. And my understanding was it worked great, but it was a better receive antenna. I mean, it didn't put him out any farther. He was using 100 watts, and he did some single sideband, some CW. But he was able to hear a lot farther because there's just more surface area on the wire. And that was kind of the thing. But the term long wire, Hayden, can kind of mean anything. So I would go back to the question and say, what do you mean by long wire? I mean,
when I think of long wire, when I think of long wire, I'm thinking of the lower bands, 160 meters and below, sort of 630 meters. I'm not sure if you've got that band over there, but we do. We've got 630 meters, so
we do.
That's very long.
I'll tell you my 630 meter story here in a minute when you let me.
Yeah. Oh, well, go ahead now.
All right. So we 3 or 4 years ago, 630 meters was an experiment. It took a special experimental license in the USA, and a couple of guys I knew got it, and it was kind of fun to watch. I never got it, but I was kind of fun to listen to their stories. Well, we went down to Costa Rica for DXpedition, which if the travel ban ever lifts, I want to get a bunch of you YouTubers down to Costa Rica. We're going to do a big shindig down there, drink a lot of beer, smoke a lot of cigars, do a lot of radio. But we went down there and we strung up an antenna that was for 630 meters because down there it was legal at the time. It was legal here with a special license, but it was legal down there at any time. So we strung up an antenna. It was like 910 feet long. We strung it across the farm we were on down there. And we did some whisper contacts with it, and that was fun. It was just fun because it was on a different band than I've ever been on before. But that was it's interesting to see when you do a whisper contact. You just basically send out a ping, and then you look on the internet and see all the stations who heard you. And it was kind of fun to see that. But yeah, that is definitely a long wire. It's about 910 feet long.
Yeah. That's very, very long. Actually, I've just noticed another question. So this was from Kay Ensman, who did the super chat. Well, before we do, let's say hello to Ham Radio Dude. In the house.
How's it going?
The dude. Thanks for joining us on the live stream. How are you? Talk about your channel.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm Ham Radio Dude. I have a channel on amateur radio where I basically do a lot of tutorials and walkthroughs on how to essentially get a radio up and working. And I've been venturing off into a few other things as well, trying to make videos a little bit more, get out there and do things. So that's pretty much it.
And you've been doing the FT-8 off with Steve as well, TO.
That's right. It's fun. Once a week we go out there, we play FT-8 and have a good time doing it and get to play with the chat and talk to the chat. It's a good time.
Sweet. So let's go back to that question again. When putting an antenna on a tripod above a roof, is it calculated above the roof line or the ground? I'm using a chameleon spider antenna with ham sticks.
I'm sorry, what was the brand of that antenna, Hayden?
Oh, don't make me say it again.
Chameleon. You said it right.
Did I say chameleon?
You said chameleon. I had to give you grief for that. Yeah.
I didn't hear that.
I don't know. What did I say? I said something in the last live stream when we did these, and I noticed it straight away, and I was very embarrassed. But I don't think anyone else noticed. We don't have these antennas.
You're your own worst critic, just like I'm my own worst critic.
Chameleon.
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 Chameleon's a lizard.
Yeah, chameleon.
Nebula, somebody says in the chat.
Oh yeah. And what's the other one? Not oscillator. It's
Oscillator.
Oscillator.
Oscillator. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oscillator. Yeah.
Skeletor.
Some bad guy from the He-Man cartoon.
Yep.
So I'll turn that one over to you guys because I don't know much about that antenna. I know that's big in the States, isn't it?
I'm not familiar with the spider antenna with ham. Okay, let me rephrase. Chameleon makes several versions of antennas. The spider antenna with ham sticks, I think, is an MFJ product. If Chameleon makes one, I'm not familiar with it.
I guess probably
I'm not sure.
I don't think it honestly matters what the antenna it is. He's mounting it on a tripod above his roof, and then it's kind of just get it in the air. Number one,
It's what to answer your question about calculations. It should be calculated above the ground line and or above sea level. It doesn't really matter your
ground isn't dirt.
Right.
Electrical ground may be several feet below the dirt or maybe several feet above the dirt, depending on your location. But, get it up as high as you can, and the higher the better. And, don't hurt yourself in the process and get on the air.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would buy a Chameleon antenna for a permanent setup. They're excellent portable antennas, but you can get something as good that will function well and potentially hold up better in the weather and stuff than one of those for a lot less money. So for a permanent antenna, I would look at something else. Basically, the Chameleon is just a random wire antenna. You can attach the actual wire to the feed point. I forget what they call the matchbox on that thing, or you can attach that basically tent pole type construction whip that stands up as a vertical, and regardless, it's fed with a 9-to-1 in the box, and they perform well. But like I said, I would probably do something else for a home station antenna.
Yeah, I agree with that. Chameleons are made for like backpackers and portables and temporary setups and whatnot.
This is a very good question. So Peter VK1PDW says, using a disc cone antenna for 270, but the SWR changes hugely when I go to use it. LMR 400 N-type connector, B and C adapter to IC-705. 1 minute it's 1.2 to 1, and then off the scale. Ideas. I would probably say you may have a loose connection somewhere.
Yeah, coax problem or something somewhere.
Water in the coax, perhaps.
While the wind blows, maybe something's making intermittent connection there. Don't think it's a problem with the antenna as per se, because you're getting a low SWR at some point. So it seems like something's loose there or something's wrong in the coax. So check that out. Probably the first thing to check. Has anyone else used a disc cone as a transmitting antenna?
No.
They seem fairly popular down here. Mainly, I think, because they're so wideband, but I'm not sure how efficient they are. And we've also got Red.
Red says good everything.
I was gonna say you should invite Charlie in here because he's in the chat.
Yeah.
What's up,
I put the call out, and Charlie was on our previous Ask An Elmer, and it was good to have you on there. How are you anyway? And what's happening?
Hey there, doing good. Hey, I'm just saw the stream and thought I'd hop in here. Nothing really going on other than just enjoying a day off of work and throwing rotten tomatoes at Adam and his beverage build.
I love your shack in the background, though, Charlie. The boxes look very, very, very neat and very stacked, and your shack there on the right hand side. What are some of the radios? I think it looks like a Yaesu 897. I can see. What else have we got there?
Oh, a few handhelds and a few. There's a 2900. It's a 75 watt 2-meter antenna. And then there's another one that's I forget the name of it. I just bought it for 40 meters, but I don't know, just a few 2-meter antennas and radios, and then this FT-897, like you said, and then a handheld there. I think it's a FT-60ARK.
I don't have as great a shack as that. I really need to work on that. Going back to our long wire discussion too, this Highland Craftwork says from ARRL Antenna Book. Wire antenna is not actually a long wire unless it is 1 wavelength or greater in length.
Right.
So that goes back to I think what Jason was saying with the 20 meter long wire, 1.5 wavelength long wire.
Yeah, they're often even much longer than that, 2 to 3 wavelengths or so. And when you do that, you actually get some pretty big lobes. When you go more than a half wavelength long, you start getting lobes of radiation coming off the antenna. At a full wavelength, you've got sort of 4 lobes, almost like cloverleaf type pattern with a little bit of compression to the leaves. And as you go longer and longer, more multiple half wavelengths, those lobes compress in the direction along the antenna. So you end up getting a bit of gain basically in the direction the antenna goes and slightly off to the side, as opposed to having most of your radiation broadside to the antenna. So that's definitely something to consider in setting up a long wire. You generally want the long wire pointed kind of toward or away from what you're trying, where you want your signal to go.
And speaking of a long antenna, Red said earlier, how many beers does it take to make your beverage antenna, Adam? If those who haven't seen it yet, go over to K6ARK Portable Radio and check out his beverage antenna video.
Although, to clarify, it really isn't a beverage, is it?
No, it's not. It's
They're the remnants of beverages.
Yes.
So, you want to explain that? Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, someone was correcting me in the chat earlier about the chameleon antenna, and there may be a chameleon version that I'm not familiar with, but I think it was Highland Craftworks, if I recall correctly, was noting that chameleon does have a base station antenna. So if you know more details on that or know the name or what to search for, let us know. I'm curious. I want to look that up and figure out what it is.
For sure.
So Ditto 2X has a question for Jason.
Uh-oh.
I picked the wrong question from Ditto 2X. Is this the correct one?
No, that's the right one. Yeah.
No, that'll work.
705 is a first radio.
Okay, so you guys stop me when you've heard enough of me.
Stop.
Jason,
The
stop.
705. The 705 is a fantastic radio. I love mine. I've got it right here. There it is right there. Okay. It's a fantastic radio. My problem with the 705, I shouldn't say that. My problem with new hams getting a 705 or any QRP radio is that you should not, in my opinion, you should not get a QRP radio for your first HF radio. My first ever HF radio was an Icom IC-706 Mark II, not the Mark IIG, but the Mark II. That was my first ever HF radio. It was 100 watts on HF, 100 watts on 6 meters, and was like 10 watts on 2 meters, I think. So my point in saying that you shouldn't get a 705 for your first HF radio is that it's only 10 watts on an external power supply. It's only 5 watts on a battery power. If you understand that, if you understand what QRP is, if you understand what low power is, then great. Go get one and you'll have fun with it. It's an awesome, awesome radio. But if you're just getting a license and just want to make HF contacts, I highly, highly, highly suggest you get a 100 watt, what's called a full power radio as your first HF radio. You can get an IC-7300 from Icom, which is almost exactly the same thing as a 705. It doesn't have VHF and UHF, but other than that, it's almost exactly the same thing as a 100 watt radio. Yeah, and Hayden's background there. And it's a 100 watt radio. It's $300 cheaper than the 705 at this point in time. And you're going to be much, much happier with it with a base station antenna and using it as your first HF radio. So if you got your license to do soda, if you got your license to do backpacking, if you got your license to do parks on the air, low power, then great, go for it. If you got your license because you just want to get on the air from home and a base station antenna, get a 100 watt radio. That's my advice.
Unless you're climbing an ultra high peak, the 7300 is just as portable in my book. I mean, you're talking ounces at the top of a summit, and then you're worried about a 705 for sure. But parks on the air, 7300.
For the size that a 7300 is, this big, something like that. It's actually quite lightweight for the size it is. It's not very heavy at all. But again, it depends on what you're doing. It depends on if your main focus is backpacking and soda and packing as light as you can, then 705 would probably be better than a 7300. And there's probably a couple of radios out there that are even better than the 705 as far as lightweight radios go. But if you're talking about a base station antenna, get as much freaking power as you can, because you're going to be on your AC main, you're going to be plugged in the wall, you're going to be in a nice heated or air conditioned shack. Might as well be comfortable and put out as much power as you can.
I say let's just face reality. Get both, because you're a ham radio guy. You're gonna get both anyway.
Yep. It's a good second radio.
I said for your first radio. I didn't say for your only radio. But yes, Charlie is absolutely correct.
And then add
because
the
I have a
9700.
7300 also. I have the 705 sitting right here, but I have a 7300 in the garage over there.
All the radios.
All the
I've got
radios.
all three as well. In fact, I've got the 9700 over there too.
My first HF radio was an FT-817, and I used that radio for years. I had moments where it was incredibly frustrating, but I think in the end, having that as my first radio made me overall a better operator. I'll caveat that and say that I think you guys are right in that for the vast majority of people, you should get a 100-watt radio for your first rig. If you are like me and have immense mountains of patience and are willing to, and are willing to fail and fail and fail again in trying to make contacts with stations you can hear, but they aren't going to be able to hear you because you're trying to work them with 5 watts of sideband on a crappy antenna. In the end, it certainly can make you a more highly skilled operator. And I think there's a lot to learn by operating QRP.
I totally agree with that. The reason I say what I say, and Adam's a prime example of someone with great patience. And if that's you, be honest with yourself. If that's you, then great. I just don't want you to get burned out on the hobby because you're trying to use a 10-watt radio, 5 or 10-watt radio for your first HF radio, and you can't ever make any contacts. I don't want you to get burned out on the ham radio hobby, because ham radio is a fantastic hobby, and I want you to be able to make contacts when you get on the air the first time.
And I would second that.
But everything Adam said was absolutely 100% correct.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jason. I just gave it that same advice to somebody who was coming into the hobby and was interested in doing soda. I said, get a 100-watt radio first, because you can do more with it, and then if you want a second radio, then that's when you go to QRP. I don't know whether he took my advice or not, but I agree with it.
I think that's
right behind me is my first radio, 897.
Yeah, and don't let Adam fool you. He's carried an 891 up to the top of a mountain many times. Okay?
And a 7300.
And a 7300. And you can, if you really want to do QRP, you can turn the dial down on a 7300. It'll do 5 watts. You can do that with a 7300, but you can also do 100 watts, which you can't do with the 705. So, that's my advice. If the bottom line is a 705 is $1,299 and a 7300 is like $1,000. So if you're just wanting HF and you just want a base station, get the 7300.
And it's also important to point out, remember, 10 watts is very different if you're the one being hunted. So, if you're spotting yourself and you're in a park and everybody's chasing you, that's different than trying to use that 10 watts to break into that pile up.
Good point.
Yep.
Yep.
There's one more point too, and possibly he's looking at the 705 not only because it does HF, but does it do UHF, EHF as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, you still go with the 100-watt, like 991 and the FT-991 from Yaesu, and then you'll have your HF and you'll have your UHF, VHF too. You might, if you're considering that. Because I could see that being one reason you wouldn't want to go with the 7300 if you're looking for like the all-in-one package.
Well, yes, you are correct. But the 7100 is actually about $300 less than the 7300, and it has VHF and UHF all mode.
Perfect.
So I don't apologize for it. I'm an Icom guy. The 981A is fine too. It has a nice waterfall. The 7100 does not have a waterfall. But yeah, there are other options out there as well, I think is what you're saying. And yes, you are correct.
Got it. And it really does depend on everything that you want for that first radio.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people get drawn into trying to have one radio that has VHF, UHF, and HF in it. The only argument that I would go with on that is if you really know you want to get into single sideband operation on with the 705, particularly on QRP. But beyond that, I much prefer having a separate handheld radio and or mobile rig in my car that's VHF, UHF only that I can operate and use while I'm using my other radio on HF.
I second that as well. Yep, that's the way I operate.
Me too.
And I think some people, if they buy the 705, they see it as a shack in a box because it will do everything. Yep. But if you want the Icom, as you say, you've got the 7100. You've got that if you want that shack in a box with extra power. Mm-hmm. If you're looking away from Icom, probably the only other one would be the Yaesu FT-900, a bit like the one that Chuck KK6USY's got. That's another good radio, and I've owned that radio as well. But it all depends on your needs, and probably the best. I think that the best starter radio is the 7300.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. For HF, yes.
Yeah. And for 6 meters. Don't forget.
Yeah, HF is 6 meters. Yeah.
True. Yep.
We go back to some questions. We've got a couple more here that I've found. Larry off the grid says, "What wire gauge is best for end-fed wire antennas? Looking for a permanent install using trees to hang." I bought 12 gauge. Is that going to be too heavy?
No. If you're looking for a permanent install, I would get as big a wire as you can hang.
Yeah, as big as you can support. It all boils down to the supports you're using, and if you can,
right.
The drawback to the bigger wire is that it's heavier, obviously.
Yes.
And to stretch it out horizontally and get it as high above ground by putting it under tension, you have to put it under a lot more tension when it's a heavier gauge wire.
Right.
So that's your trade-off.
Yes, agreed. Yeah. If you're, he said looking at a permanent install using trees to hang ? Yes, if you're looking at a permanent install, I would get the biggest freaking wire you can find. Double aught, triple aught, whatever. If you're looking for someone to put in your backpack, that's a different story. Yeah, but that's my opinion.
John M7CPT amateur radio. What frequency would an antenna need to be resonant on in order to have a usable harmonic on all of the ham bands?
I don't know that it's possible for all.
Right.
No.
But
you can get a bunch, but it depends on where you feed the length of conductive material, be it wire or aluminum, copper tubing. So my current home base station antenna is an 80 meter off center fed dipole. It's fed about 20% of the way in from the end, a fifth of the way in from the end, and fed with a 4-to-1 balun. I get 80, 40, 20, 17, 12, 10, and 6 meters without a tuner. And it's 3-to-1-ish or less on all those bands. It's very, the 7300 handles it just fine. So that's one way to get that. You can do something similar with an end-fed 80 meter wire and get kind of similar performance on that. You're out of that antenna, you're never going to get 30 or 60 or 15. It just doesn't work. But if you feed it in a different spot, you can, as someone else in the chat mentioned, get every third harmonic. So 40 is resonant on 15. Or if you end feed a wire, every harmonic. So if you end feed a 40 meter half wavelength of wire, you'll get 40, 20, 15, and 10. And sometimes you have to finagle it a little bit, but that typically works.
And if you use a DX Commander, which is a quarter wave vertical on the HF bands, some of the wires, so the 40 meter wire will be a third harmonic on the 15 meter band. And if you use 80 meters, that will also be a third harmonic on the 30 meter band. So you can get away with it, but it's not just one single piece of wire. It's obviously lots of wires for all the different bands, and then you get some of the harmonics. Yeah, lots
of wires, and then you get bands that it's not even designed for, like 2 meters and 70 centimeters.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm actually building an antenna at Adam's advice. So you're going to see that upcoming. That off-center fed at different feed points is a really cool concept. So yes, everything he said is correct.
Another interesting question from William Myers, KA8GIM. I'm getting back into ham radio. Great, good to see. Thinking of installing a hex beam on a 20 to 30 foot mast. I have land to put it up, but it may be 150 to 200 feet from my radio. Will this be an issue? It won't be an issue if you use good quality, low loss coax.
Exactly.
The beauty of an hex beam is it doesn't have to be high off the ground. And if you're talking about running it away from your radio, yes, what Hayden said is absolutely correct.
So depending on what frequency, obviously the hex beam's designed for. The higher in frequency means that there'll be more loss. The lower in frequency, less loss. So find the highest frequency on your hex beam that you want to use, and then you can use that as a basis of how much loss you'll have for the particular coax that you're using. So probably, I don't know, maybe 10 meters is probably or 10 or 6 meters is probably the highest frequency that you're going to be using on your hex beam, I would assume. So use that, and maybe, or 200 feet, what's that? That's 60 meters. So maybe you might get away with some good quality RG213 maybe is a minimum, I would say. It's probably getting a little bit lossy up there, but yeah, maybe LMR 400 or something like that. Do you guys have LMR 400 over there? That's what it's called.
Oh yeah.
Yep. That's what I use.
Or if you really want to go for it, the hardline, the Heliax LDF hardline.
Heliax is good. I'm redesigning my shack right now, and I'm using the Italian-made Mezzi and Poloni coax, which is even better quality than the Times Microwave according to the specs. So Times Microwave LMR 400, and if you can get your hands on LMR 600 is fantastic. But yeah,
if it will help you, I just posted a loss chart, a coax loss chart in the private chat. If somebody could post that onto YouTube for me.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thanks. Because then you can get an idea of how much loss you'll have per 100 feet.
Yeah.
And you'll find out it's not really a big deal if you do choose the right coax.
Yeah. Now I need to scroll back up to where my questions are.
1958 John Deere says he uses LMR 600 for 2 meter and 70 centimeter. That's a great idea. On the higher frequencies, you want the bigger stuff, but on HF, it's not as important.
Right. Yeah. So hex beam height, ideally as high as possible, obviously, but getting it half a wavelength above the ground on your lowest frequency is going to set you up pretty good for success. So if it's 20 meter on the lowest frequency, if you can get it 35 feet up or so, you're doing all right.
There was also a comment, which is a very good one from Peter VK1PDW, that says foundation license only allows 10 watts here in Australia. That's why I bought an IC-705. Made some great FT-8 contacts from Australia, Europe, and South America. So I guess that is another point, that if your license only allows you a certain amount of power, then sure, go for it.
It's a good point.
But buying a radio that does allow you more power means that you can always turn it up later when you upgrade.
You can grow into it.
I'm trying to find. Just pop a comment in the chat, Sean, because then I can.
No problem.
Then I can fix you up for mod status. So we've got. Oh, here we go. So which YouTuber is good for soda POTA information? Go for it, guys, because we've got so many POTA and soda experts on our panel today.
That guy down at the bottom center there is super
K6ARK and Red Summit RF. I mean, don't let them lie to you. They're going to be really modest, but those are the best soda guys out there. Seriously.
And then I'll also throw out N1CLC for soda, K8MRD in the chat for POTA, Smoke Signals RF in the chat for POTA, Astro Leah for POTA. Who else is out there?
That's your daughter. You're biased.
I am.
Yeah, I would be too. I'm just saying.
She's the most awesome young female ham YouTuber I have seen.
That's right. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So there's a lot of carryover between types of portable operation, and you can learn a ton that'll help you with soda from watching POTA videos or really any other kind of portable operation videos. So so check them all out. There's good tips across the board.
Just scrolling through some of the questions here, still trying to find some.
DX Commander's in the chat.
Uh-oh.
He thinks he's going to heckle us.
It's about, well, it's only like midnight
Callum.
where he is, so it's not that late.
Yeah, the link's
Oh,
in
and
the
there's-
Discord if you want to
There's
join us.
Chris in the chat, Digital Analog Ham. He just gave you a super chat. He's in the same time zone
Thanks,
as Callum.
Chris. The link is in the Discord if you want to join us, Callum, and not get sleep.
Right. Callum was just
So-
on my recording, so he should be up.
So I did see another question here. We've got from
Highland Craftwork says we missed his question.
Where?
yeah, it's difficult because of the way that the chat is on StreamYard. The comments load and then it moves where you were, so you need to scroll back up again to find where you were. So I do apologize if I missed your question. Just post it again and one of the guys will be able to find it. Do ham shacks need special wiring?
So my answer to this one was no, not to get started. And then as your ham shack grows, you might want to have a special ground tap. You might want to have 17 or 18 different antenna inputs. You might want to have 220 for a big honking amplifier. But just plug in the radio power supply and get on the air.
I agree with everything Tio just said.
Yeah.
And I found Highlands. I think this is your question about ground radials. Is there a benefit to using mixed length radials? Well, Callum, who's in the chat, he's got some
just
excellent information.
Yeah, he drank his glass of milk, so he's off to bed.
He was
Check out,
drinking that on our stream.
Yeah,
Check out Callum DX Commander's channel. He's got some great videos on ground radials, which apply to not just his own antennas that he builds, but just vertical antennas with ground radials in general. So
I will say the short answer to this one is yes, it matters. No, it doesn't matter. Just like everything else in ham radio. The DX Commander ships with the ability to make, 30, 40, 50, 60 radials that are all 10 meters long, and it works just fine. Or you can have a band of interest and a direction you want to go. And let's say I'm in Washington State and I want to talk to Japan on 40 meters. So I will put down a bed of quarter wavelength radials on 40 meters on the opposite side of, from Washington State. I would put it on the east side to try and hit Japan, and that would help focus the energy in that direction.
Mike says that K8MRD radio stuff is probably his favorite channel for POTA, so a little bit of a shout out for himself there.
So another note on radials for a vertical antenna. For radials on the ground, the length is less critical. So you can get away with non-standard, non-resonant length verticals when the radials are on the ground. Of course, that depends on how conductive your ground is and how well those radials couple to the ground. For elevated radials, you certainly need a resonant radial for the band you're going to be on. It's going to make a difference there. So if you're on poor ground, some of that carries over, and you very well may find you're able to tune the antenna better and get it closer to a 1-to-1 SWR if you have radials that are resonant on the length, resonant for the frequency you're going to be operating on.
Now, this is a great question from Steve on Facebook. How to deal with common mode currents on the feeder when using end-fed antennas, especially when using high power. So my end-fed antenna that I was using until I got the DX Commander, I used, I think it was 8 ferrite cores, and I just wound the coax through the ferrite cores until I couldn't fit it through any further, and then ran it back to the shack. And I got very little common mode current in the shack. I don't know about you guys. What some of you guys might use ugly balance, which is just coils of wire, a coil of coax. What do you guys use to stop common mode currents?
The broadband dash 43 or 31 mixed toroid is going to by far give you better broadband performance as a common mode choke. The ugly balance can work, but they're typically only effective on a narrow range of frequencies. They don't give you high impedance across a broad bandwidth of frequencies. If you're getting bad RF back in the shack, it may not just be common mode current, it may be reflected power. So also check your antenna's resonance and make sure your antenna is tuned as best it possibly can be. And that's going to make a difference and help you out as well.
Very good answer to that question. Thank you, Steve, for asking it as well. Sean Hartley, I have an 80 meter off-center fed dipole, so this would be good for you guys who are playing with that antenna. I need to trim it to make it resonant. If I trim off 6 inches from the long side, how much should I take off the short side? I know it shouldn't be an equal amount.
I would say it depends on where you fed it. Is it fed at 20% of the way in or 33% of the way in? And basically, you want to maintain that 20% feed point or 33% feed point. So if you're fed a third of the way in, take twice as much off the long end as the short end. And I probably wouldn't trim. I would fold back first and see if you can work it out that way.
So that's a very logical answer. I really like that. That's perfect. The fold back versus the trim, I have been taught, and this is how I do it, is when you fold it back, you also want to wrap it around itself.
It helps.
To help cancel that out. If you just lazily fold it over and it's like this far apart, you're not doing any good. It's got to be real close.
It's not technically. Yeah, it's not technically the wrapping the twisting that makes it any better. It's how close you get those wires that is what has the greatest impact.
Don N5SKT, a great follower of all of our channels and usually is in the chat all the time, says, what can you do to increase the bandwidth of an antenna without changing the length? You can get
a coil.
Depending on what antenna you're building, Don. Like, so for instance, well, for me, I've built plenty of Yagis. If you use larger diameter tubing on the Yagis, that can increase bandwidth, depending on how much bandwidth you want. Probably thicker gauge wire may also help as well. I'm not sure what you guys think.
Yeah, so thicker gauge wire. Thicker gauge wire would help a small amount. I'm not sure how noticeable that'll be on the HF bands. If you look up something called a cage dipole, basically what you're doing is making a sort of an artificial, very large diameter conductor by just having multiple wires with spreaders that are all the same length. That could work. Another third option, for example, if you wanted to have all of the 75/80 meter band, you can create essentially a fan dipole with slightly different length elements that will give you a broader bandwidth that you can cover with technically a single antenna.
The Smoking Ape says, I cut my dipole twice and it's still too short. What can I do? You can pass the GMRS test.
Oh,
right.
Shots fired.
Hey, Hayden.
Yeah.
I need to drop off, man. I got to get a couple things ready for my stream that starts in a half hour.
Yeah, so actually, before you do, just give a promotion because we've got 97 who are watching. So head over to Jason, Ham Radio 2.0. What's your stream about this evening?
Today, we're going to talk about why you should choose radio for MCOM, what kind of MCOM stuff we can talk about, GMRS, ham radio, why I love radio, that kind of thing. So it's going to be kind of my theory on why radio is better than all other forms of communication, and then also, take questions and answers, take questions from the audience as well. So there's a lot of turmoil, I'll put it that way. There's a lot of questions in our country today. Hayden, you don't have this problem right now, but over here where some things are up in the air and people are asking about ham radio, there's a lot of people getting licensed, which is a good thing, in my opinion. And I just want to answer some questions from people coming in and asking questions to what kind of radio you should choose, what kind of service you should choose, what's the difference between this, that, and the other, and that kind of thing. So it's going to start in about 30 minutes on my channel.
So yeah, head over to Ham Radio 2.0. Thank you, Jason, for being on today. It's been great.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the invite. Yeah. Great setup you've got here. I really like the audience interaction. I really like the question and answer section you going. So please keep going with it.
Yep, and hit me up with that idea that you said you had. We'll chat
Sure.
about that too.
Yeah, no problem.
Great. See you.
Thanks, man. See ya.
In relation to Don's question, he said that it was to increase the bandwidth of the 10-meter element on the DX Commander. So I have a similar thing. My bandwidth's not too wide, but I can still tune it in with the 7300 tuner across 10 meters. So that's what Don was referring to there.
Yeah, it's a very large band. There's a lot of bandwidth within that one band.
And you made a great comment that you could add another element that's slightly different length, and that will get you the say if you cut one for the bottom end of 10 meters and then the top end of 10 meters, it should tune them both in.
That was my thought. I mean, that's essentially what you're doing with the DX Commander in general. It's a fan vertical, right? So I would think that would work. The only thing I think you'd probably have to be cautious of is the coupling of those two elements because they are close in resonance. So it would probably take a bit of experimentation and probably doing your best to separate those as much as you can in the stack there.
And Kay Ensman says, I love all your videos, but morning comes way too early. Thank you for all you do. Need more antenna info on all of your channels. So yeah, antennas are one of those weird and wonderful things that everyone can experiment and play with. I think that it's the one part of amateur radio that really gets the experimenters out in us. I'm pretty sure that all of you guys can agree. So yeah, we don't. I'm not sure if I've missed any questions there, but if you do have any more, just pop them in the chat. We will stream for a little bit longer. As I said, we're going to be leading into Jason's stream on his channel, so we've probably got another 20 or so minutes here to go. So another one here from Highland. Can you use different wire lengths on either side of a dipole to increase bandwidth? I don't think you're going to see awfully big. Yeah.
Check out a fan dipole. I think Chuck K6USY, I think he recently put out a video on building a fan dipole. So look up KK6USY Radio Adventures and find his fan dipole video and check that out. That's probably a good place to start. He had a really cool idea for spreaders on that too, plastic things to hold the wires apart. I think he used trimmer line, plastic line trimmer line that he heated up and melted to get the shape that he wanted. And then I think he used heat shrink to hold them onto the wires and keep them spread the same distance. So pretty cool idea and a good antenna build there.
So he's asking about a single band dipole, just to be specific. He just updated the chat.
Yes. So we've also got Joseph V3G KT. Has anyone built a linear loaded element for 80 meters on a spider beam?
Nope.
Right, well, that answered that quick.
Hey, dude, have you used your Wolf River coil for that?
No.
Spider beam's just a vertical mast, right? Or is it a very specific breed of antenna?
I got no idea, to be completely truthful with you.
Spiderbeam makes a variety of stuff. They make portable Yagis that technically only go up to 20 meters. I'm not sure you'd get much out of a loaded element on their Yagi version because you wouldn't have the boom length to make it worthwhile. He may be referring to building basically a single vertical monopole using linear loading, kind of like I think Cal does with the DX Commander on 40. So
okay, so he's got a 12-meter mast. And so, yeah, I mean, I would say, toss a wire up and put a Wolf River coil or something similar on the bottom, or go up and back down as many times as it takes.
And if
Is that
you don't
similar
want
to the Rolly coil?
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to
So-
buy a Wolf River coil, if you by chance have a 3D printer, you could actually find the coil part to print online. It's a pretty long print, about 16 hours, but you'll have the coil just as you need it for what you're looking to do.
Mhm.
See if I
Here's
can
a,
find.
Here's
I'm
a
sorry.
controversial one from Steve. What is the worst commercial available antenna you've ever owned?
I'd have to look up the brand on that one, but I have a 6-meter wire dipole that is sitting in my junk box right now. I used it maybe twice and got one contact, but maybe 2 contacts out of it. And the whole time I've used it, yeah. I don't know. Maybe it's better to avoid the brand name of it.
Yeah, probably we won't say any brand names on air, but yeah, I'm trying to remember myself. Most of the commercial antennas that I've bought, they've all been pretty good.
John's trying to start the G5RV wars again.
Oh, we've got a video on that.
Check the back catalog, folks.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I just put a link up to an antenna that came with my FT-817 when I bought it used many years ago, and it's called a Miracle Whip antenna, and it supposedly operates from 3.5 to 450 megahertz, so 80 meters to 70 centimeters, and it's got basically a variable inductor inside, extremely inefficient variable inductor for at least for the amount of loading it provides. And I want to say it's how long? 50-inch telescoping whip. Actually, mine I think came with just a BNC connector on it, so you could stick whatever VHF type antenna on that BNC connector. And you could actually use it to receive and listen, and it would hear stronger signals. And it would, the signal strength would pick up when you adjusted that inductor, variable inductor, to the right range. But it was completely worthless as a transmit antenna. I don't think I ever made a contact on that thing, and I didn't try much because I knew how bad it was.
Yeah. And I have seen sometimes CB antennas for 27 megahertz CB advertised, and they'll be, say, mobile antennas, and they'll advertise them as 5/8 antennas. But there's the one thing you need to be careful of is that a 5/8 antenna on 27 megahertz is about 7 meters long. What's that in feet? I'm not sure what that is in feet, but it's very, very long. When you actually look at this antenna, it's actually fairly short, and they do have a little bit of base loading, but I don't think that they're going to fit that much wire in the base. So you need to, I suppose, just do a bit of research and check out what antenna you're actually buying.
Yeah, and there are some characteristics of antennas that are competing factors, and if you want to smell the BS on an antenna advertisement, look for the 3 factors in an antenna are the antenna size, the antenna's bandwidth or broadband or multiband functionality, and the antenna's efficiency or gain. And you're never going to have a small antenna that's broadband and high gain. It just does not exist. So each time you sacrifice or gain an advantage in one of those, it's a trade-off on the others. So there's a reason that I keep coming up with and building larger and larger and more ridiculous antennas to bring up to mountaintops. It's because size does matter when it comes to antennas if you want performance and broadband functionality.
Just before we get to the next question, David Wilson says, I'm new, still waiting on a call sign. Where can I go to be completely taken advantage of by an unscrupulous antenna salesman? That would be DX Commander, M0MCX. Check out Callum's website and channel. But Kyle says, can you explain the difference where you would use a 9-to-1 versus a 1-to-1 versus a 49-to-1 matching unit? That's a very good question.
I can take a swing at it from the new ham, everyman kind of perspective. These are transformers, and your antenna is going to your radio is going to want an antenna that works on 50 ohms, and so that's where you would come in to do the math. So I'm not going to do math on camera, but a 1-to-1 matching unit isn't really matching anything because it's one on one side and one on the other side. It's a good way to get rid of some common mode current, and it's a good way to make a center point for a dipole. A 9-to-1, think about 9 times 50 ohms. And if you have an antenna that reads out on your antenna analyzer as being 9 times greater than 50 ohms, a 9-to-1 transformer will get you there. 49-to-1 is kind of a similar thing. So 49 times 50 ohms and somewhere in between. And then I'll let the mechanical engineer speak.
Fair enough. Well, so one of the things that I try to explain with the 1-to-1 balun, or AKA the common mode choke, is that think of a dipole, right? We've got coax, which has the ground on the outside of the coax, the shield, and the driven element going down the center of the coax, and that ends up at your antenna. And the driven element obviously doesn't radiate while it's shielded by the shield, while it's surrounded by the ground. But when it gets to the end, that driven element connects to a quarter wavelength piece of wire going off in one direction, and the ground connects to a quarter wavelength piece of wire going off in the other direction. So what is there to stop that shield of the coax, which has nothing blocking it from radiating, from becoming part of your antenna? And it does just that if you don't do something to prevent that from happening. Depending on your setup, that can be more or less of a problem. With a perfectly resonant antenna, it's typically less of a problem. With just the right length coax, it tends to be less of a problem. But the bottom line is that if you're not using a balun, a 1-to-1 balun with your dipole, your coax is going to become part of your antenna. Typically, that's going to throw off your radiation pattern, and it can also result in sending more RF back into your shack, giving you more noise that you're picking up through your antenna from local radiated sources of RFI. So that's where those 1-to-1 baluns, those common mode chokes really come into play. And again, I think it. Tio mentioned, the kind of the functions of the 49-to-1 or the 9-to-1. It all comes down to matching the impedance of your antenna to the impedance that your radio wants. And impedance is really just resistance to RF. It's resistance to the flow of RF. And when you have a mismatch, you have an inefficient transfer of power, and you have some of that power getting reflected back to your transmitter, sometimes to the point where it can do some damage or just cause funky things to happen.
Great. So I think we're starting to get close to Jason's stream in the next 15 minutes. So we might just go with one more question and then we'll wrap up. What is the best low-cost SWR analyzer, and why is that one a good one? I'm sure you guys have probably all agree. Maybe the Nano VNA is a good choice.
Yep, just make sure you get it from a reliable source like RNL.
Any other models? I still have MFJ antenna analyzers. They're fairly good for the basic functions that they do. Rig Expert is another one.
I've got an MFJ. It's that 223, and I've been using it a lot lately, and I like it really well. It's pretty much just a little VNA, but it's kind of idiot proof. So it's, it shows it all the information I need on a graph, and so I can glance at it quickly and roll.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Does that one have UHF capabilities?
No, that's a good point. This one only goes through 60 megahertz, so that's the disadvantage of that one.
So I have the 226 here, and it goes up to 230 megahertz. Still doesn't do UHF, but it's pretty good. It does the whole readout, just like Steve's talking about. And what's really cool about it is the ability to either save them and then you could load them up to your computer, the graph, or you could actually plug in the USB and go directly to the computer. So that's kind of nice. But I do wish it did UHF.
Yeah.
Yeah, I still have the old school was it MFJ 259, I think it is.
Yeah.
And I mean, I actually bought a refurbished one, so I only paid $250, I think, for it, and works great. Yeah, that thing right there,
No,
it works just
yeah.
fine. I mean, especially for what I'm doing, I'm just making some dipoles and a few other things. I don't really do VHF much, and so it's good for me.
Yeah, I think for the price, for the cheapest thing that will serve you well. It's really hard to beat a nano VNA. Just avoid the cheapest ones on Amazon, the Gecko model. The Smoke and Ape has a great video that talks about how to pick a nano VNA and which one you should get. I think currently the highest end ones with the 4-inch screen are like $150, and they go down from there. So, but incredibly useful and functional units for a ham for a really good price.
So, yeah, thank you very much for that question. So, yeah, I guess we're getting towards the end of our Ask An Elmer live stream here today. Thank you for everyone who's asked a question today. I apologise if we did miss it. As I said, it is difficult to keep up with them all. I'm sure that we'll be doing this again, but before we wrap up, let's go around the group again and just sum up what your thoughts were on today and what's coming up on your channel. Give a shout out to it again. So we'll start off. Steve's the first one, temporary offline on my screen. Go for it.
Yeah, so coming up Monday night, I have a local ham from Minnesota on Ham Nuggets who's going to be talking about a ridiculously imaginative antenna that he's built, and he's a very strong engineer type, so be prepared to go deep on antenna subjects with him as well. And then Thursday, Ham Radio Dude and I are going at it again for some FT8 off action, and all the other wonderful.
You've got some competition though now, haven't you? So
yeah,
you've started something.
That's good. That's good.
So, sorry, Steve, what else is happening?
That was it. I mean, there's always something I'm building or repairing or fixing or refurbishing or playing with on my channel. So if you like vintage electronics and ham radio gear and all kinds of crazy stuff like that, come take a look at my channel.
Temporary offline. I'll post a link to all of the channels in the chat as you go around. So take it, Adam.
Cool. Yeah, I don't have anything specific on my video agenda. Monday night, tomorrow night, I do have a video that's a wrap-up of my performance in the ARRL VHF contest. That's a fun one tomorrow night, tomorrow evening, and Monday night ham radio. And beyond that, there will certainly be more antenna builds and projects from the shop here. I've had multiple requests for building that portable rotator that you guys saw on my 6-meter 3-element portable beam, a build of that beam itself, and what was the third one? Oh, the extended double ZEP, which I like to call the J-pole killer, the roll-up J-pole killer. It's a portable wire antenna for 2 meters that notably outperforms the J-pole. It's a pretty cool setup. So there will be some build videos coming probably in the next 2 to 3 months on those.
Great. That's yeah. So check out Adam K6ARK. I'll put a link again in the chat. So check out, give T.O. and Adam a sub for their channel. Now, Charlie, what's happening on Red Summit RF coming up?
Yeah, thanks, Hayden. I appreciate you having us on here today. It's been fun. I've learned some things. My channel, as you know, is all about summits on the air. So, of course, we had some snow here. We're having it right now up in the North Country of Arizona in Flagstaff area. So I have a summits on the air snow activation. I'm sure 1 or 2 or 3 coming up here pretty soon. On each of those excursions, I'll probably do something, talk about something. Like I just bought my first BioEnno battery, so on one of those I'll probably talk about that a little bit. And I still got to do a review of OutD logger and make sure I figure out if that's better than the VK Portalog or not. So just mostly soda stuff, you know. It's a fun channel, Red Summit RF. Go ahead and take a look at it.
Yeah, some great videos, Charlie. I must say that everyone on the panel here today, your videos are we're really stepping up in ham radio. Everyone's videos are getting better and more interesting. So, yeah, give everyone a sub here today. Ham radio dude, Sean, what's happening on that channel apart from your FT8 off?
My next video coming up is going to be something completely different. I haven't seen it on ham radio yet, and it's not really ham radio related completely. But I bought a bunch of ham radio mystery boxes, and I'm going to unbox them on my next episode. See what we get for how much it costs.
Nice.
And yeah, that's about it. Maybe in the future, though, I'm looking at some kind of battery testing on all the radios I have. But I'm also going to do a blindfold test where somebody turns on a radio for me, and I have to rate the radios from which one sounds the best to which one sounds the worst. And at the end, we'll get an idea of which radio sounds the best.
You're 5'9" again.
You're 5'6'9".
5'6".
Like a good unbiased test.
I hope so.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so sub Ham Radio Dude in the chat again. There's links for there. So yeah, give everyone a sub here today. And finally, we'll finish off with Steve K6ARK. Good game.
So I dug out or stole, however you want to put it, the daughter's 705. So I've been playing with it a good bit. So expect a few videos on that. More importantly, though, I have 18 of my students, my Padawans, that are taking their test on February 11th. It looks like is our day. So, you know, a lot of the folks in the chat have helped support them, and I just take this minute to say thank you all for helping to support them, and hopefully we will have 18 new hams here in a couple of weeks.
Yes, we will.
Thanks.
That's good, and hopefully they can learn something from Ask An Elmer. So thank you again, guys, for joining me on the stream today. David Wilson says, I like subbing to these guys just for the thumbnails. So, yeah, some of us have been upping our thumbnail game. So thank you again, guys, for joining me on the stream. Don't forget to subscribe to all of these guys' channels and to the Ham Radio DX channel, and we'll see you in the next Ask An Elmer soon. Thank you, 73.
73, everybody.
Thank you very much. Take care.